Welcome to the Program Design Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Monique, teacher and curriculum writer turned program mentor and business strategist for coaches, educators, and online experts. Whether you're looking to create your first ever group coaching program or scale your current offer for more freedom, revenue, and consistent income, this is the podcast for you. Here you'll find practical strategies and encouragement mixed with a bit of manifestation and intuition to help you grow and design a program you absolutely love. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Program Design Podcast. In this week's episode, I am actually starting another series. And this is about how to create a live experience or a presentation without having a pitch at the end, without selling, without having a traditional webinar. So what I've been noticing is that a number of my clients are using webinars like me, which is fantastic. But sometimes people are using other strategies, which I love, that are a way to build trust and create connection with their potential clients, but they aren't really an environment where you really want to have a pitch at the end. It might be something like if you're doing a professional development workshop or you're doing a lunch and learn or something like that. How do you actually structure that kind of content so that it builds trust, but also builds demand for your program? Because ultimately that's the whole point, right? If you just build trust, but no one ever buys from you, that's not necessarily what we're looking for. So in this series, I want to share a little bit more on this strategy and give you an idea of how to structure it, what your talks or your presentations could look like, and then also how to build demand without actually directly selling. So this is part one, and we are getting into the structure. So we're going to talk about what actual experiences you can create for people, why they're really going to make a difference, and how to actually structure them. So before we even jump in, I want to share that, first of all, even though I'm saying that it doesn't have to be a traditional webinar, I love webinars. That's how I sell my program for the most part. Webinars work really well for me. And it's actually why a lot of people join my program, because they loved my sales process so much. They wanted to learn from me and how I created that. And at the end of 2025, I had a lot of people saying, like, this was the best webinar I went to all year. This was the best presentation that I went to all year. This is the best training that I went to all year. Obviously, I was very appreciative, but I'm very grateful for those comments because I have spent a lot of time optimizing, refining, improving my webinars over the last number of years now, honestly. And so I am definitely not anti-webinar. I love webinars if they're done well, if they are done in a way that's not just a giant pitch, that they are really thoughtful, thinking about what people need to hear from you, how can you make it valuable for them, and invite the right people into your programs. So I am not anti-webinar by any stretch of the imagination. But what I've noticed is that it's not always right for every niche, and it's not always going to be the main sales strategy that everyone's going to use. So in my program, we talk about repeatable sales systems. This could be a repeatable sales system that we're going to get into today, or it might just be another way of building trust with your audience, which comes into one of the main things that I wanted to talk about today, which is what I mean by these live experiences and why they are so powerful. So when I talk about a live experience or a presentation, what I mean is something that's maybe a little bit shorter, a little bit less formal, that creates connection and trust with your audience. And this is so important because, yes, of course, you can create trust with podcasts like this one. You can create trust with Instagram, but there is something really special about actually having a connection with someone and having them, like, when you come to a training of mine and I actually respond to you and you feel seen, you can feel like if you're doing a presentation and someone can feel your energy, feel your vibe, they can get to know you, they can feel seen. Like there's a whole interaction, and that it creates this real connection that you can't necessarily get by watching something pre-recorded or listening to something pre-recorded. So I love a live experience, be it virtual or in person, but there are ways that you can structure it so that it's very intentional, that it's not just building trust, but building demand. So when I say these live experiences or presentations, I wanted to give you some examples of how you could even use this in your own business to start off. So I have clients doing this in a number of different ways. So one of my past clients she's going to be creating some lunch and learns. And you could do this if you're doing like virtual lunch and learns. If you're working in a corporate space, like maybe you are a leadership coach or an executive coach, maybe you work in like you sell to teachers or districts and you're doing professional development lunch and learns. That can be like a really nice informal way of connecting with people. And it's a low barrier to entry to have someone come to a virtual lunch and learn. So that's one example. Another one of my clients uses very successfully is she has monthly office hours. She has different topics that she goes through and they're virtual. And that's how she sells her main mentoring program. And then, so those are the two virtual strategies, but you can also do this in person as well if you sell more locally. So I have another client that I love this idea of hers. This was not mine. And she does talks in a coffee shop. So she has people within that, like her ideal people go to coffee shops. They are in that kind of the right demographic. They want to learn from her. She's the one that kind of person that her program is. It can serve a wide range. Like it's a specific problem. But when you go online, you want to go specific person, specific problem, right? And so in person, she can just draw people in who have the problem that she's solving. It's around hormones and menopause and that kind of thing. So she can have people chat with her about that in a coffee shop, kind of like low risk, relaxed environment, and they can get to know her through there. So I love the idea of a coffee shop, kind of like informal chat with a group of people that you organize with the local coffee shop. Another one that you can do is if you do any like local presentations or local like lunch and learns, networking kind of things. Like I've seen, that's actually how I hired one of my brand designers. I was at a networking kind of event and she spoke. And so I got to know her and hired her there. But there are other opportunities if you sell to entrepreneurs or businesses where there's in where I live, there are local lunch and learns, and I'm sure that there are in lots of other cities as well. So that can be another example. So the 4 that we went over today that aren't like that traditional webinar 5-day challenge live launch might be a lunch and learn, virtual or in person, an office hour, coffee shop talk. Another thing that I've done that I don't always call it this, but it's this concept of a brainstorm. So basically when I create it is I have a framework that I'm going to share, but I make it really interactive and I get people's input and I write it down on a whiteboard. So I have no slides. It's very much about connection and talking things through. And so that's another example. Could be something like a brainstorm, which could be a similar, like a kind of like a connective, like a connection based get together where you talk about a certain concept. So that's the kind of structure that we're talking about here. It's like informal, 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, but 30 minutes, 45 minutes, low barrier to entry, where it's not a formal like slideshow where people sit and listen the whole time. There's a lot more engagement, interaction, talking things through, because that's part of like the magic of why this can really work well for you. The reason it can work so well is because it gives people another touch point and they can see that you are a real person. So right now we're in that era, I've been talking about it and I'm sure you've heard other mentors talking about it as well, that trust recession, where there are a lot of people who are very hesitant. Like I don't know about you, but I'm guessing it's not just me. I get so many prank phone calls during the week, and there's just so many things that you're just wary of trusting. And this is another way of building trust, that they can see that you're a real person. They can get to know you. They can ask you questions, and it just creates this strong level of connection that I don't think you can replicate as easily in a video. So that's why I love it. It can really build trust, but it can also create that demand if you do it properly, do it well, with some specific strategies that I'm going to share in part 2. But let's talk now about how to structure this event so you can think about what kind of content you might actually want to include when you go to create this for people. So the first thing that you want to think about is when you go to structure it, I like the idea of having like this 30 to 45 minute. It depends on your niche, right? What you're going to be creating, how long people have. If you're doing some sort of lunch and learn, like 30 minutes, depending upon how long people's lunch hours are, if you're working in like a corporate space or something like that. But what I like to think about is I like to have, say, if it's going to be 30 minutes, I might have like 15, 20 minutes worth of content, and then I have space to discuss afterwards. Or it's like 20 minutes of content, 10, 15 minutes worth of like conversation and discussion around it. So that's what I'm kind of thinking about in terms of my timeline of how long I want this thing to be. So when I think about what kind of content I'm going to include in something more informal like this, something that's more about connection and engagement, first, I want something that is going to get people talking, right? And I want it to be very outcome oriented. If you aren't new to my world, you will know that everything that I do is very outcome oriented, results focused. And so I always start when you think about talk like this, like what is the result that I want to create? A, for my business, and B, for the people who are coming into the room. So for me, I always think about like, what's my call to action that I want people, what's the next action that I want people to take with me? So if I'm doing like when I've done professional development for teachers, I'm not just going to pitch my program in professional development. That would be very strange and very out of like not culturally appropriate in the school environment. But I'm not going to just say, thanks so much for coming and leave it at that either. I want to think about what is an appropriate call to action for this specific, like a way for people to continue the conversation with me. Maybe they follow me on Instagram. Maybe I have a free resource they can download and become part of my email list. Maybe they can book a call with me if they want to hear, like if you're selling to districts and you have a specific program that they can buy, maybe you're not giving them like a specific pitch where you go through the whole thing, but if they want to learn more about it and see if it's right for their school district, they can book a call with you. So thinking about like, what is the end goal that I want for them to take with me? And also, what is the outcome that I want them to take away with that they're going to like, what's the value add that they're going to have from this? So a few ways to think about this is one thing that I like to think about is before someone works with me, what do they need to understand or what do they need to believe? So let's give some concrete examples. So say you're selling, I'm going to give some examples of districts and then I'll share something else afterwards. So I like to give different examples in different niches. But say you're selling to districts and you have a program that is specific that they can use, that they can bring to their schools and that teachers can use. And you can also mentor teachers in this particular topic or something like that. So I might talk about why, like what's going on in the, like, okay, let's give a really concrete example. So a few weeks ago, I had Allie on the podcast and she is a previous client of mine and she is a friend of mine as well. So if I were Allie and I were saying, okay, my program is for girls in schools, like middle school age, I'm going to think about what can I create? Like, what do districts need to believe before they go to hire me? So it might be something around bullying. It might be something around disconnection. It might be something around self-esteem. And I might give them something like some shifts in their beliefs so that they know what they need to, like, so that they start to see what needs to happen or what needs to shift in their, like what problems are going on for girls, for example, because people might not know, like, you know, your expertise better than the people coming to your event, right? So like, why is this important? And then I might give them like one takeaway that they can go and implement. So like, if it's a decision maker, maybe not, I can just straight up say like, here's the program. But if it's more teachers, principals, you can think about here's like one little action or one little project or one simple thing that you can use in your schools. And maybe it's like a handout or a takeaway or something that they can go and use in their schools afterwards. So it's like, this is the outcome of it. They're going to learn about like maybe girls' self-esteem. And then there's one tangible like activity or exercise that they can go and take away with. And they can like, they have this handout afterwards, but they're also going to learn about my program indirectly as I talk about that. Does that make sense? So they have a tangible outcome that they're walking away with, but I'm also sharing the bigger picture of what my program looks like. If I was doing this for parents, say I was helping parents with, let's say like toddler, and one of the challenges parents have is kids who are, like meltdowns. And so say if I have like, I'm helping parents and one of the struggles they have is like leaving the park without their kid melting down. I might give like a couple of easy strategies, like one or two strategies that parents can walk away with so they have something of use, but they're also going to see the big picture of what they really need to do to solve this problem in a bigger way. So it's like, what's that one thing that I can do? Like, what's the outcome for them? What's the outcome for me? And then when I think about the outcome for them, I'm thinking about like, what's one tangible thing that they can walk away with that's going to be really helpful for them. It depends on the industry, of course. You don't want to give too much how-to, but like a little bit can be helpful in this situation. So that's an example of the outcome. Next, I want to think about how I'm actually structuring this. And I wouldn't structure it in a way that is very formal, where everyone just sits and has slides. and they just listen to your slides the whole time. You want to have it more engaging, because that's why I think these strategies can work really well and why it can build that close rapport. Like I did one a little while ago that was similar to this. And I had a client, like I didn't even talk about my program, but she booked with me right away because she saw indirectly what I was doing and she could see a little bit about what my program looked like. And it really built demand and like interest for her, right? So, but the way that she built trust with me is it was conversational and she really felt seen. So when you think about how you're going to structure this, think about how much time you have and think instead of like filling it the whole time, like how can you make it more engaging? What kinds of questions can you ask? How can you get conversations started so that you have less time on content and more time like actually speaking to people and helping them feel seen? And then the last thing that I would think about when I'm going to structure this, which is getting into a little bit about what I'm going to talk about next week in part 2 about building demand without the pitch, is about creating a big picture, creating the big picture. So one of the mistakes that I made and that I see a lot of people making is that we forget just how much more knowledge we have than the people coming to our programs, coming to our talks, coming to any event with us. And what I used to do is I was so worried about being salesy when I used to do talks like this, is I would really want it to be super helpful and I would focus on something really tangible and hands-on that people could take away, like the big takeaway that they could get from this workshop or this training or whatever it is, right? Which I did say you want to do. But the mistake I was showing it in a vacuum. I didn't show the big picture of how this fits within the scope of my work. I didn't show as like, this is one piece of the whole puzzle. So people think, oh, that was great. That's how I need to solve my problem by using this one strategy. When actually this is one strategy of a whole thing of my tool belt. Does that make sense? So you want to be able to show your big picture. In Signature Program Design, we talk about creating your signature framework, like a visual way that you walk someone through your whole process. But some visual way or some big picture, you want to show that this is just one piece of the whole puzzle. So let's recap what we talked about in part 1, and then I'm going to share a little bit more about what we're going to look at in part 2 of this series. So this is part 1. This is about structure. So we talked about what to include in a presentation without making it a webinar. And we looked at the 4 ways you can create a live experience that doesn't include a traditional webinar or 5-day challenge, which was the lunch and learn, a virtual one or a live one, office hours, a coffee shop, a local lunch and learn networking event, or even what I said was a brainstorm, where if you have a framework that you can show for people, you actually, like, it's hard to explain in a podcast. You'd have to come to one of my trainings on this, but like, I don't have any slides for it. I just have a whiteboard. I have the framework in mind, and then I talk to people and fill it in as we go. That could be another one that's really engaging. So these are like 4 or 5 different examples, right? The reason that this is so helpful is because it really helps people connect with you, feel your energy and feel seen, and they get to know you in your authority or in your expertise, and they can see if maybe down the line they might want to work with you. And so how to structure this more informal presentation is the things you want to think about is, first off, what's the outcome for you? What do you want people to do next after this talk, after this presentation, after this workshop? What's your end action? What's the next step with you? And also, what are they walking away with? Why is it going to be worth their time? What's the one tool that you can have them walk away with? And one of the ways to think about this is what do they need to know before they work with you? What do they need to experience? What do they need to believe? Where are they before they work with you? And what's one small thing that you can get them closer to being ready to work with you in a bigger way? I like to make these really conversational so that people are engaging with me, and it's a small group kind of discussion rather than that feeling of that webinar where one person's talking and everyone else is quiet and listening. You want it to feel more interactive. And the big thing you want to make sure is that you show the big picture of how this one strategy that you're teaching fits in the big picture of the work that you do. So that is about how I would structure it. In part 2, next week, I want to share about how you can build demand without creating the pitch, without directly selling. Because the concern I have with teaching this is that you might end up doing what I did, which is I used to have trainings where once a month for a long time when I was a mentor teacher, and I had people who came to every single one of my free trainings, loved my free trainings, and never bought anything from me because I focus so much on teaching and not enough on indirectly selling my program. And so I want to show you how you can think about indirectly selling your program so you don't have a pitch, but it builds curiosity for what you do and they want to hear more about it. So it bridges the gap for them to hear more about it later, but you're not doing the direct pitch, which you would see on a webinar, which is like, here's my program, here's the promise, here's the price, here's the bonuses, here's the fast action bonus, here's all of that stuff. We're not doing that in this situation, but you still want to build demand. And that's what we're going to get into on next week's episode. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, send me a message on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. My Instagram is lauramonique.business, and I will see you next week on the Program Design Podcast.